In the first talk, we looked at why you might edit a piece, and particularly why you might choose to edit your paper or your essay after you've spent some time writing it. After that creative process, you do this very routine, methodical work, the editing. I suggested that when you started editing, you should try to paraphrase or to précis your paragraphs so that you could see whether or not each paragraph was genuinely on topic and indeed dealing with one topic at a time. So all the time you're trying to clarify, you're trying to avoid confusion. Now, I think in editing there are four main priorities, four principles of editing. These are clarity, style, authority, that's your authority, and punctuation. The last one may seem a little bit dry, but I think it is so important it could almost be the first priority, the first principle. If you mispunctuate something, then it ceases to mean what you hoped it would mean. The first point about clarity, well, of course, you need to make sure that your content is clear. You need to keep checking and rechecking your content. But let's look here at the humdrum issue of what to do with your sentence structure. Reduce sentences to the important points. Is every word that you've written necessary? This is particularly a principle of journalism articulated very nicely by George Orwell. A subordinate clause. A subordinate clause is exactly that. It should be subordinate to the main clause. Very often you find in a student essay the subordinate clause contains the meat of the idea. It shouldn't. It should be an add-on. So avoid or justify using a subordinate clause. A subordinate clause has a subject and a verb, but is not independent. In the same way, if you have a parenthetical bit, if you have something between brackets, make sure that the sentence itself still works. So take the bracketed, the parenthetical bit out and see if the sentence still works. And do the same thing, whether the parenthesis is indicated by brackets or by commas. Jettison adverbs. An adverb generally indicates an ill-chosen verb. For example, if you say he was walking very, very quickly, you might as well say he was running. Adjectives, in contrast, add colour and detail, but be very careful of those too, because too many adjectives may make your piece florid or baroque. Be careful, because you're not writing a novel. The second principle is about style. And this, I would make 3 points here. One, avoid awkward or wordy sentences. Do not insert words because they sound good. And 3, avoid purple prose. They may all be pretty well interchangeable. But let's just look at number 1. Avoid awkward and wordy sentences. Avoid pompous, stilted language or jargon. If you can't explain something, don't use it. I remember being told that the best essays were those that could explain something complex in language that an intelligent 7- or 8-year-old child would understand. You're not really going to get points for baffling the reader with pompous, inflated language. Do not insert words just because they sound good. Make sure a sentence is relevant and necessary. I remember when I was a schoolboy, I became very much enamoured of the dictionary and the thesaurus, and a friend of mine would very kindly read my essays back to me, and we would find ourselves collapsed on the floor with mirth because I had chosen words so badly, because I didn't really understand what I was using. Do make sure you know what the words mean when you are using them. Avoid purple prose. Don't be tempted to become a verbal dandy. Try to be simple. Third point is authority, and that's your authority. Check that your opinions are relevant, are sound, are clear. Again, 3 points. Strengthen sentences, avoid weak arguments, and be careful of your pronouns. So try to move from phrases like it seems or it appears to be to more confident phrases like it is, if at all possible. Avoid weak arguments with too many qualifications. I believe, you may disagree, but blah, blah, blah. And really the big bugbear, try to avoid the vertical pronoun, particularly I. I believe. Well, everything you're writing in your essay is yours. Otherwise you are a plagiarist. But I believe. You are not Martin Luther King. And actually try to avoid the pronoun you. You always comes across to the reader with a tone of condescension. You simply makes the reader feel hectored. Try to avoid these two pronouns if you at all can. Finally, with regards to punctuation, a sentence must involve a full stop and a verb. When you're editing and you're chopping away at things that don't necessarily need to be included, there's every chance that you're going to chop away at the structure of a sentence. So just check that you still have sentences intact before you surrender your paper. A comma is very useful. It's a visual breath. And a semicolon, a much underused bit of punctuation. A semicolon has the power of a full stop, the value of a full stop, but it doesn't stop the chain of thought. A semicolon can be used to join two sentences. So, 4 principles of editing: clarity, style, authority, and punctuation. In the third talk on editing, I will look at how you use citations, how you use references, and also some quick fixes for proofreading. Until then, thank you very much for joining me. This is Tim.